Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to step aside from the rats in a sack fight for a moment, take a look at what Boris Johnson's up to while we're distracted. And one of his tricks seems to be trying to frustrate the COVID inquiry, which now begun, and threatens to expose another one of his supposed legacies. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, for some reason, the general public think that Johnson and his government did well with COVID. They actually still think that. I'm fairly confident I could put together a 30-minute presentation that would point some things out that would change that view fairly effectively for most people. But I can't possibly get that message out to enough people to make a difference. But an independent inquiry into the government's handling of COVID in the early days could start to change some minds. Especially as you might expect some details to start coming out this winter when we inevitably get hit badly again. I mean, we're getting hit badly now, and it's a very warm summer. Not so much today, but by and large, it's been quite warm and we're scheduled for more heat waves to come. I look at the data on hospitalisations and deaths related to COVID, and I wonder, this is it, summer. What's it going to be like in winter? When classroom and office windows aren't open and people are meeting more indoors. There's surely going to come a point where the media can't keep covering it up. Genuinely amazes me that they are still doing so right now. But this inquiry, bit of an old problem for Johnson and the Tories. But it's a particular problem for Boris Johnson. If this inquiry actually manages to get some key facts out to the public, you are looking at a scandal way bigger than partygate. The reason partygate struck a chord with the public is because it represented a prime minister gathering for parties when he told people they couldn't even gather to say goodbye to dying loved ones. Well, imagine how much anger the public would feel if they find out that those loved ones needn't have died at all. We have recently just gone over the 200,000 mark for COVID deaths. Not all of these could have been prevented, of course. But Boris Johnson tries to claim we did the best in Europe. We were one of the worst. We could have been one of the best. We absolutely had that potential. We're an island. It's way easier to stop people getting into the country. We were hit after many other countries, including in Europe, so we had a lot longer to prepare than some others. Our chief scientific advisor and chief medical officer are experts in infectious diseases. We struck the jackpot there. And the government had formally identified a global pandemic as the #1 threat to the nation for a decade beforehand. So there was plenty of pressure on ministers to prepare well in advance for something we were expecting. We had everything going for us except one thing. We had a Tory government. And if this or anything even remotely this stark is put to the public, it won't just be the end of Johnson, he's gone anyway. It'll be the end of the Tories for some time to come. This would be a scandal the party would not recover from until every single minister that was involved at any stage of the pandemic was removed from positions of influence. They'd have to be out of Parliament altogether before people would trust the Tories again. And that's important to consider when you look at what Boris Johnson is doing. While we're all distracted by Liz Truss sticking the knife in Penny Mordaunt and Penny Mordaunt sticking the knife in Rishi Sunak and Rishi Sunak going, make me popular. What's Boris Johnson up to? So he apparently has tasked the government's top professional lawyer, Sir James Eadie, to assess how much information the government really has to provide to the inquiry about its role in the mess. The report in Bloomberg suggests that Eadie has warned ministers that they are likely to face vast claims for damages from families of victims. Now consider that one statement. So if that's true, if Eadie's actually advised that, what the government's top lawyer is saying, and he is a good one, he is saying that the government is facing claims on a massive scale. Now he wouldn't be saying that unless he took the view that the government had not only acted negligently, in other words, to make these claims valid, but that there was plenty of evidence that could easily come out to prove it. And let's consider some of the issues which could prove particularly problematic for the government. Remember, the inquiry is not up to the present day. The pandemic's still going on, even though the government denies it. The inquiry is very much focused on the initial months, as far as I can tell. But what are the issues? First, Boris Johnson ordered our functioning NHS test and trace system to be stopped so that we could get this mythical herd immunity. Take it on the chin, he said. And just in case people haven't caught up, herd immunity in the form you read about in these dodgy media outlets doesn't actually exist scientifically. There is a term, herd immunity, does not mean what these people try and tell you it means. Allowing the virus to spread through the population, which he can't deny saying, because he said it on the telly, we've still got recordings, was scientifically illiterate. There is zero way that his scientific advisors and medical advisors would have advised it. This was a political decision and very dangerous. It will have cost a lot of lives. Second, Johnson acted against the scientific advice and delayed the first lockdown. So given he removed our mitigations, the virus spread so quickly that we got ourselves in a position where only a lockdown could save lives, and Johnson still avoided doing that. It is believed that delayed decision cost thousands of lives. It also meant the lockdown lasted longer, so it hit us economically harder as well. It's this simple. If you lock down early, you don't need to lock down as long. But it will be the needless deaths, not the needless hit to the economy, that will get the Tories in trouble. Third, it was government policy for some time as well to discharge elderly patients from hospitals to care homes without needing a negative COVID test. The government has since tried to deny it, but it was written in black and white on their guidance. I did a video at the time with a copy to the website, which is obviously that page is no longer there, but I've still got copies. This meant that COVID positive people were dumped in care homes to infect our most vulnerable. This cost a lot of lives. Fourth, instead of going back to the NHS test and trace, which was working before Johnson ordered it to be stopped, or adopting a system similar to other countries, the Tories gave a former jockey £37 billion to build a privatised test and trace system. A subsequent parliamentary inquiry found it didn't actually help at all. Not that it didn't work well enough for the money. Not that it didn't work as well as other systems in other countries who spent a fraction of the amount of money. No, it didn't work at all on any level. They said it didn't even help. We might as well have not had it. That is what a parliamentary investigation concluded. There are plenty of other things that the government messed up on as well, including delays in getting PPE because of their corrupt VIP lane scam. But in terms of the scope of the inquiry, I think the 4 issues I've just detailed could easily be reported on, and I think the report would be due next year. So almost certainly before the next general election. It'd be very, very difficult to pin all the blame on Johnson, given the scale of the failures, if they indeed come to light. Not that Johnson wants to take any blame at all. There seems to be a scheme afoot to block a lot of material from being handed over to the inquiry. The report suggests that they will withhold documentation on the basis that ministers are allowed to make deliberations privately. This is why we have things like the 20-year rule, where government documents are published 20 years later, when you would expect the senior members of the government at the time would have moved on, and so it would not embarrass current members of the government. And there is a good reason for that. There are times when a minister has to discuss things or decide things that an uncharitable spin could make it look immoral sometimes even. Sometimes, ministers do have to have tricky conversations where they have to talk about things we'd rather they didn't talk about. So, the rule itself is fine. And that's why I can absolutely believe it'll work, because it is a genuinely established principle that documents that detail ministerial deliberations and decisions can be withheld for 20 years in the interests of confidentiality. It used to be 30. So the full horror of what this government did during the pandemic basically is not going to be fully known for 20 years at least. I do hope they're still alive then, because I want them to face the public when it does all come out. But for now, it sounds like they're going to withhold sensitive information from the inquiry. And someone asked me if it could be stopped, if this scheme of Johnson's could be stopped. Now, obviously, Boris Johnson is still Prime Minister for a while yet. He can easily have this system in place during that time. there are essentially, to my mind, 4 ways in which the inquiry could get these documents. First is that the next Prime Minister changes the policy and allows those documents to go to the inquiry. This is spectacularly unlikely because the revelations would reflect very badly on the whole party, making it impossible for them to win the next election. So they would absolutely keep Johnson's block in place. It's also easy to justify, as I say, this isn't even a case of unprecedented action. It is actually convention that ministers do not get embarrassed about their confidential decision-making process for 20 years. Second possibility is that Parliament doesn't like this and it votes to overrule the government and force the publication of these documents. It could do that. But as the clear majority of MPs are Tory MPs, I don't expect this either. In fact, I wouldn't necessarily expect an awful lot of support even amongst opposition MPs because, like I say, we have to keep going back to the fact that it is normal for ministers to expect confidential discussions to remain confidential for the rest of their careers. The fact that they may be hiding decisions that they deliberately got wrong, not just got wrong in hindsight or, could be spun to make it look bad, is neither here nor there. The information, if released, would cost the Tories a lot of seats at the next election. They're not going to do that. Third possibility would be judicial review, seeking a High Court judgment to have the documents released. Now, if the government tried to withhold some documents which don't compromise ministerial confidentiality, and there was evidence of this, maybe some scope for that. But in general, and bearing in mind I'm not a legal expert, but I wouldn't expect this to be all that fruitful unless there was evidence that the government was trying to withhold documents beyond what was reasonable. Because I don't think a court could say that you have to hand over documents if a minister argues that actually that needs to remain confidential. And fourth, an official leaks some sensitive documents to the media while the inquiry is ongoing. This is the most probable. It is possible. I would imagine, however, that the most sensitive documents can only be accessed by a few officials, which would make it way easier to identify the culprit should there be a leak inquiry, and I think there would be. But we may get some documents leaked if the government tried very hard to suppress information. That being said, I do feel there's already enough information in the public domain for the inquiry to get its teeth into. I still think this inquiry should shine a spotlight on a lot of issues that have been hidden from most of the public. And if it comes after a truly terrible winter, when the government abandoned all mitigations, because there's none in place right now, it would be politically very damaging for the Conservatives. They will certainly not be able to just blame Johnson if the public see the continued failures of the new administration. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.